Welcome to Stories of Hope. I'm Christine Hotchkiss. You see, I believe everyone has a story that is unique, just like our fingerprints that put us on the paths and the journeys of our lives. Some find purpose. I really, really believe that every story can help, heal, inspire, educate, and who couldn't use a lot of hope, especially what we've been through in the last year and a half, but we won't go there. Today, you're in for a special treat. Wait, you're in a special treat every time I have a guest because all my guests are special. Today, we're talking to Angela Savage. Who is Angela Savage? She is the daughter of the legendary 1973 Indy 500 race car driver Swede Savage, who unfortunately lost his life in that race in 1973. We're talking to Angela today to see what she's doing back in her hometown, in her community, and how she's honoring and remembering her dad and the struggles that she went through with the loss of her dad and how she came out of the fire. Please help me welcome my guest this morning, Angela. Good morning.
Good morning, Christine. Thank you for having me on your show. It's a real honor to get to see you in person. You're just as lovely as you are on camera, as you are on the phone.
On the phone, same as you.
And I love your energy. You just have a lot of positive energy, and thank you for letting me be a part of that today.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity because, as you had already mentioned, we spoke on the phone and you said you don't give everybody the opportunity to sit and find out who Angela is or talk about your dad or anything about you because not everyone is worthy of that, right?
Well, I sure used to be like that. I'm trying not to be like that now. I'm selective in who I spend my time with and my energy because I just have to have certain boundaries for my own mental health. But I'm learning that a lot of that is just myself being shy or being afraid to show up. And I can use that as an excuse sometimes to continue hiding from myself and everyone else. But what I'm trying to do is do everything that I say I'm going to do, suit up and show up. Sometimes you have to do it afraid. You know, it's not that we're not afraid. You just have to do it anyway. So I'm trying to be more open with myself and my story in order to hopefully inspire other people to do the same thing, to find your own truth, to look yourself in the mirror and say, who really am I? And find your gift and then turn around and give it to everyone else.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm doing with what my story was. But we're not going to talk about my story today because this is about you, even though we share a similarity, and that is the loss of a loved one. But before I get into the details of everything, I know that your mom was pregnant at the time your father passed away. And typically I would ask the question of, tell me about your loved one, but I'm not sure if that's the right question to ask because you're actually living with the memory through other people of who your dad was. Do you want to share maybe what you learned of your dad? And then we can go into how that journey went the way it did to where you are today.
Sure. Let me just kind of start by saying in 1973, my mom was 6 months pregnant with me in the audience watching when my dad, 200 miles an hour, came around the corner and he hit the wall and he blew up. And my mom was watching that. So after that, my mom really left the racing community and took me with her for very good reasons and never really looked back. But I finally got back to the track at IMS in 2014 when my dad's fans, they figured out who I was on Facebook and they started to ask me, well, have you ever been to the Indy 500 or you need to come here and see the mark that your dad left, and my first response was, hell no, why would I want to go to the one event that really ruined my life, and other people in my family. Something in the racing community that's not in the past hasn't been spoken about too much are the fatal crashes, which they used to just die left and right and the show went on. That's all different now. But in the old days, they didn't really want to talk about it because it's so sad and it's uncomfortable and they kind of swept that stuff under the rug. Well, in 2014, that kind of changed with IMS. They really embraced me coming back and the track got involved and Doug Bowles, the president of IMS, got involved and just being there and meeting all of my father's fans and seeing the race, which is bigger than life itself. It's really mind-blowing. It's the only thing these days that really makes you feel like you're watching like you're a gladiator spectator in the Roman Coliseum. I mean, it's mind-blowing.
Right.
But when I came back, that's when I started to learn a lot about myself. It was time for me to face my fears and let go of all of the. I've been running my whole life. It's like I was stuck, like my throttle was stuck, or I like to say like I was a bucket, but nothing would fill the bucket. I tried everything, drugs and alcohol and running from life in general. It just didn't work. So after I got back to the track, I actually spent some time in the spot. He didn't die there, just to be clear. He did survive for 33 days. And I have a book coming out. We talk about the 33 days. He was really riding on spirit alone. I think he had one foot in heaven at that moment when he hit the wall. But when I went to face my biggest fear, my big fiery dragon, and face it, eye to eye, and I told you on the phone, I spent some time at the spot, and I yelled at the wall, and I cussed at the wall, I spit on the wall, and then I forgave the wall, and so it was this really amazing moment. You could feel something really spiritual happening, and ever since then it's like an onion, all these layers of just crap that I've put on myself, that other people have put on me, curses spoken over me by people that love me and don't, all this stuff just started to come out. And I in the process started writing a book with my business partner Ted Warner. It's coming out this year.
Name of the book?
Savage Angel.
Oh.
And what it talks about, the first half is really about my dad. It's a autobiography, or as close as one probably will be. But the second half is really about what happens to a family after a tragedy like that, after that kind of trauma. How do you surf that kind of weight? What happens to these people? Do they just fall out? Or, how do you survive that? And so
I find it interesting, by the way, that you say that, because people don't see what happens, what we see on the inside of those lives. Like you had already mentioned, going into dark areas of your life. And that is one thing that people ask me too. Like, oh, I can't imagine. But it's like, we are those people that we didn't get that option to imagine it. This is what our life is, with no answers, right? We just have to figure out what we're supposed to do day by day. And we look like we're heroes to some people, or they put us on a pedestal thinking, oh, you've lost a loved one, and you just keep smiling and doing what you do. But they don't ask you really what happens. Then you hear of the separation of families. You hear about someone going into addictions, as you already mentioned. You're just like, these are some of the dark areas.
That hole.
Yeah.
Make me stop feeling. I can't feel this anymore. How do I get out of my mind? And then the isolation happens when you realize that people that haven't been through the same type of trauma as you, they can never relate to you really on the level that you and I can relate. And other people with similar traumas. It's a different thing. It's a different when you realize that you've been through a lot, that it can be really a lonely feeling, because you feel alienated, or you feel like an alien on the planet, because people don't understand you, because they haven't been what you've been through. And that can be a really dangerous place to fall into isolation, drug addiction, all the things.
Vices,
all the vices, we just have to
there's another one too.
What's that? Sex.
Survival.
I thought you were gonna say
I'll leave it to you. No, leave that to you. Survivor guilt.
Oh,
I thought you meant too, but
that we, of course I heard the S part. Anyway, yes, survival mode.
And survivor guilt.
And survivor guilt.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, your story. You and I relate, because there's just something about being in the car. It's so unnatural.
Right.
It's just such a unnatural way to go. And thinking about you not being able to make a phone call for amount of time, and being stuck in that horror scene alone. I just have so much empathy for you in that moment. I don't know what that was like. I've never lost a child, but I have so much empathy for who you are as a person, and for coming out of that.
I
in
have to say with the same, and I thank you for acknowledging that. I really do. It goes with what you said a few minutes ago. People don't ask what really what goes on. They only see the outside of like a cover of a book. They don't know the pages within it. And it's same thing for you. I am a diehard race fan. And people, when there's a crash, we're not connected to that person, but we know who the driver is. We know the car number, we know their name, we know whatever the media has given us, but we don't see the details. So with your dad being in that accident, it's the same thing. I look at the racing industry so different now. When someone crashes, yeah, it's great to go see these, and people are like, oh, there's only these crashes. No one knows, right? He's like, yeah, the crowd's going on, or the crowd's like, oh my gosh, what happened? Are they okay? And we don't know. They don't broadcast anything thereafter. All you're hearing is about,
and the show just goes on.
It
and
does.
for that family, time stops. You get stuck in that moment, and
does.
you see time still going, and people still going about their everyday mundane lives, and it's like, wait a minute, don't you know that the world just ended for me, but it just keeps going on, and you really have to catch up to yourself, or you can really flounder, but I also believe that there can be a lot of gifts and power in facing your trauma and learning, pulling out of yourself what you got out of that, because anytime you go through something that difficult, you've learned something out of that. And I think it's our responsibility to find the gifts that come out of our fire, or the kiln, if you will, and then love ourselves for that, and then share those gifts with other people.
And there are some people that get stuck, and we already know who those people are that come across in our lives. And I really want to encourage anyone that is in that position that time does not stay there. Your thoughts stay there. That memory stays there. Like you just mentioned, like my accident, your accident will always be forever remembered in that year, in that time, in that moment. But as we know, the years have continued to go forward, and that means we still have things we need to do. And if you stay stuck, it's really not helping you in any way, shape, or form. And so I encourage people to find a way to actually get out of that stuckness. And you know that because you've shared that you went down some deep, dark areas with addiction. So I guess what I would ask with the addiction part, and you've already mentioned, drugs, alcohol, and running from yourself, or running from what we think we want to run from, but somehow we get pulled back to say, you've got to face this.
Yes.
Where was your turning point that you said, okay, I have to face this? And you talked about the wall, but there's more than just going to the accident scene. There's more now, because now the years have gone on, you have a family, and now you're doing things in the community, which we'll talk about next.
Well, I was living in Laguna Beach. I had been addicted to crack cocaine for 3 years. I was living in the coke house, the crack house. I mean, I couldn't get away. But I did get a little bit of time clean. That didn't last very long. But then I met my now husband. And at the time, he was also very out of his mind with his own trauma and addictions. And honestly, just to be candid, we got pregnant right away. And it was at that moment that I realized, this is my chance. I had to leave Laguna Beach. You have to get up and out of your environment.
Yeah.
And I told my husband, I said, I know we don't know each other very well, because we didn't. I said, but you're welcome to come with me, and we'll try this. Otherwise, I'll never bother you. But he dropped everything too. And we held hands and just drove out of Laguna. We moved out to this little city in Nevada, Boulder City by Lake Mead.
I know where it's at.
Oh, I have a little place there. And we moved away. We were strangers, and we moved away from everything we knew and went to this place where, and at that moment, I realized this was my chance. My son's name is Chance, by the way.
Oh, imagine that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So after I got out of Laguna and just in a more stable environment, that's when I really sat down to revisit my faith. I was born and raised into the Christian faith, been studying the scripture my whole life, went to private Christian school till high school. But I knew it was time for me to regroup, reboot. Everything.
Reboot, absolutely.
I had to reboot.
Yeah.
And so I literally sat myself down and began studying with Joyce Meyer 10 years straight. All 3 times a day I would listen to her, and I was so isolated because I just really needed to get a lot of darkness out. and become the empty vessel again, and then fill it up with light and good and the gospel truth and positive and love and all the opposite of what I'd been filling myself with before. So it was at that time, Chance was just a few years old when people figured out who I was on Facebook. And so that's when it changed for me, is when I found out I was going to be a mom. I had never had a happy family situation. I mean, there were happy times, of course, but you know, sometimes the dark times overshadow some of the good times. But
I think our expectations of family are just that, expectations. You talked about, you know, there's some good memories. I could share the same thing. I had some great memories, and there's some that are not so great. And there's some things that I'm pained by, and there's some things I'm blessed by. So that word expectation has so much involved in that. I think we probably use it more than we really should.